Does anyone want me to sing No One Mourns the Wicked before we go? Hey guys, it's me, I am back. Does anyone remember when I read Wicked and it was absolutely nothing like the musical that we all know and love? Does anyone remember when I said if that video got 100,000 views, I would read the second one? Have any of you ever committed to doing something and then instantly regretted every decision you've ever made? Just asking for a friend, no reason. Son of a Witch is the second book in the Wicked Years series by Gregory Maguire. There are now 5 books in this series. Yes, last time there were 4. He's brought out another one, I think earlier this year, and it's all about Elphaba's childhood, but this is not why we're here today. I loved how many people said they watched the video after reading the book or like while reading the book as a bit of a book club commentary, reading with friends situation. So I would be absolutely honoured if you would do the same with this video. I'm going to run through the plot, some key points obviously. I'm going to tell you my favourite quotes, and by my favourite ones, I do mean the weirdest ones because this book and this book really are cut from the same cloth. I'm going to add some of my own takes and reactions so we don't go completely insane. We're going to critique, we're going to analyse, we're going to go on a real journey together. This book, where do we even begin? Son of a Witch starts immediately after the events of Wicked. So if you haven't seen that video or read that book, I would advise you to go and do that now. This is your chance. I'm holding space for you to go and watch that other video. In 3 seconds, I will be giving you spoilers. If you are still here, that is your fault. Elphaba is dead. And I mean really dead, not like musical dead. Dorothy, as in Wizard of Oz, Dorothy has thrown a bucket of water over her to put out a fire and she just melted. The wizard has been forced off the throne and he flew away in a hot air balloon, and Lady Glinda, who is now married to Sir Chuffrey, has been made a sort of temporary prime minister in the interim while they figure it out. Some other context for you to remember: in Oz, there are animals like the animals that we have here, and there are capital A animals which speak and think like we do, but they're in animal bodies, like Dr. Dillamond in the first one. The wizard led a campaign against capital A animals when he was in power, so they were forced out of their homes and their jobs. Lots of them disappeared, many of them were murdered. The leading religion in Oz is called Unionism. If you watch the last video, you will know that last time we were dealing with lots of other religions. They do obviously still exist in Oz, but in this one, we just need to worry about Unionism. Unionists worship the unnamed god, and Unionist maunts, like nuns, live in a mauntery, which is like a nunnery or a convent. I'm actually not sure if nunnery and convent are the same thing or if there is a difference, but you get the idea. Also, just like last time, we have a whole host of trigger warnings. So roll the clip. This covers lots of sensitive topics, so viewer discretion is advised. Oh, also, Elphaba and Fiyero probably have a son together called Lear, but no one knows for sure because Fiyero got diarrhea and then died, not related, and then Elphaba got attacked, went to the Mauntery, fell into a coma, and when she woke up there was a baby next to her and she kind of just never questioned it. Elphaba and Lear, her probably son, went to Kiamo Co, the castle where Fiyero's family lives, so his wife and his 3 children, and they spent quite a few years living there, kind of like as one big family, before his whole family, bar Elphaba and Lear, were kidnapped by the Emerald City Home Guard, specifically Commander Cherrystone. He will become relevant again. Right, and last time, obviously, I did costume changes and location changes to keep things fresh and interesting, but this time I'm bringing the locations to me. I've got a wide range of backdrops available just to really immerse myself in the story, and I've also got these finger puppets, which I made out of felt. I made them myself. Give me a round of applause. Out of felt and googly eyes and lots of hot glue. Although actually, I have just found at the bottom of the box a rogue googly eye. So one of the characters is missing an eye. And what a fun game. We'll find out who it is together. Also, just before we begin, I want to say thank you so much for the reaction to the first video. It really blew me away. I had never made a video that was anything like that before, and it was 2 hours long, so I was really worried that no one was going to watch it, but I could not have possibly anticipated that reaction, so thank you. And also, as lots of you noticed, that was not the kind of content that I typically make. I do a lot of vlogs. I'm about to go to Florida, so I'm going to be doing lots of holiday vlogs, and I'm also buying a house, so I'm going to be making like home renovation vlogs on this channel. But I love making videos like this, and you guys really complimented me and made my head big. So I've made a whole new channel, which is called Amy's Annotations. I'm going to put a link in the description of this video, which is going to be exclusively for more long form content like this, about books and movies and TV shows and musicals and like video essays. That's the sort of style of content that I watch on YouTube. So I'm really excited to try and dip my toe in. I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it, but I'm going to try my best. I've got so many video ideas and I have already got started researching on a few of them. But basically, as I was making this video, it became quite apparent that it was going to be like probably over 3 hours long. So what I've done is split it. This is part 1, act 1, and part 2, act 2, is over on my Amy's Annotation channel. So at the end of this video, there will be like a clickable video on screen that will take you straight to the second part and straight to the new channel. So if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe over there and don't miss the second part. But obviously, if you want to see my holiday vlogs and my home renovation, you're more than welcome to subscribe here as well. I would love to have you. And with all that being said, I think that's all my housekeeping done. Let's crack on with this absolute chaos. Our story begins on our girl, Otzi. She is the trail leader who transported Elphaba and Leah from the Mortuary to Kiamo Co in the first book. I was trying to give like cool, effortless adventure girl with her dungarees and her bob, but actually I think maybe she just looks like a bit of a Karen. Sorry, Otzi. Anyway, she's now leading another group of travellers through the fields and mountains of Oz, but this journey has come to a sudden halt because they've come across something quite gruesome. They found the bodies of 3 young women who they believe to have been novice monks, so like young nuns. They're dead, obviously, and they appear to have been strangled by their holy beads with their faces scraped clean off. The faces themselves are nowhere to be seen. The group digs some shallow graves, but Otzi is keen to get back on the road as quickly as she can. The discovery has understandably shaken her up a bit, and she feels responsible for her passengers' safety as well. She doesn't really fancy being the next set of victims if whoever did that comes back for more, so they carry on driving through the night, but Otzi wakes up before the rest of the passengers, and she's looking out ahead of them as the sun begins to come up. She can see something suspicious in the distance, and as she gets closer, she realizes it's another body, but this time lying face down. She really doesn't want to stop again though, so she makes the decision to ignore it and just press on with the journey and just hope that none of her guests have noticed. She has got a job to do and she just wants to make sure that her passengers get to the gates of the Emerald City safely like she promised. But as they pass the body, her conscience gets the better of her and she changes her mind, so they pull over to get a better look. The book describes the body as being face down and genitals hidden. He appears to have been a young man. Well, at least we made it through 2 pages of the book before genitals were mentioned. That's actually quite good going for this series. It seems like his clothes have been ripped off and there's probably been some sort of struggle. All that's left are a few scraps of fabric around his waist and a boot a little way away, but otherwise he's completely naked and there are no signs of his clothes or of his assassins. This body looks very fresh, like a really recent murder. Otzi picks up the boy's body and she's really shocked to find his face is still intact. Then she realizes, even more shockingly, that he is actually still alive, but only just. Otzi continues on to the Emerald City. Oh, the back of these finger puppets are nobody's business. The Emerald City, isn't it beautiful? She drops off her passengers, and while they're there, they hear rumours about a series of attacks. Apparently 2 of the tribes from the Vinkus are fighting. So just quickly dropping in with some context here. The Vinkus is the western side of Oz. It's full of mountains. That's where Fiero was from and where Kiamo Co is. If you remember, Fiero, RIP, was the prince of the Arjiki tribe, but basically there are 3 main tribes that live in that area, and it's the other 2 who are fighting. So the Scrow, who we met back in book 1, and the Unamata, who were actually mentioned in book 1, but I didn't mention them because they weren't really very relevant to the plot, but they are another tribe, basically. That video was 2 hours long already. I really did miss some stuff out. Anyway, no one in the Emerald City is 100% sure what's happening, but the tribes have apparently already got a body count in the hundreds, and they really can't figure out any reason for the attacks on innocent people. Otzi welcomes her next set of passengers alongside the almost corpse, and they begin the journey back, but she stops along the way at the cloister of Saint Glinda, the mortuary that she'd collected Elphaba and Leah from all those years ago. The superior Maunt recognises the boy immediately, although she can't remember his name. And she says that Otzi should recognise him too, but she can't. They arrange for the boys to be carried to the infirmary, and then the superior maunt finally remembers his name. It's Lear. The next morning, Otzi meets with the superior maunt. Now, right, so there are quite a few maunts here. I'm going to talk you through the different puppets. Superior maunt, she has this little yellow bit above her head, so we know that she is the superior maunt. And she also meets with Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary. Sister Doctor is, like her name suggests, a maunt who specialises in medicine, as you can see from her stethoscope, with visual storytelling. She's quite brash and straight talking. Sister Apothecary handles the actual medicines and remedies. She's more quiet and reserved than Sister Doctor, and she seems a little bit more empathetic. Between their knowledge of medicine and Otzi's first-hand account of finding Lear, they try to piece together what they know about his injuries. His legs are broken in multiple places, along with his feet, his ribs, everything really. He is breathing, although it's quite laboured, and he's completely unresponsive, so it seems like he's in a coma of some sort. Sister Apothecary is tasked with finding some medicine that might help him, and she says what's more troubling is the discharge from his membranes. The nose, most obviously, but other orifices as well. Ears, eyes, anus, penis. At this point, I can only assume that Gregory Maguire was trying to play a game of categories, and the category was orifices. According to Google, he did pretty well, but he missed mouth, so not full points. Both Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary agree that death is quite imminent for Lear, and they have a bit of a professional curiosity around his condition, but the superior maunt gives them strict instructions. They are not to conduct any experiments or anything like that. They must only treat him in ways that either help to heal him or keep him comfortable until he dies, and they reluctantly agree. So no experiments around here. They discuss what they remember of Lear from when he was a child and whether he could actually be Elphaba's son, but no one knows anything for sure. Either way, Otzi leaves the Mauntery with the rest of her guests, who I can imagine aren't thrilled by the random 2-day stop at a convent, and we never see her again. Everyone say bye to Otzi. Tell her you love her dungarees and she doesn't look like a Karen. Meanwhile, the superior maunt goes up to the infirmary, which is a round room right at the top of the Mauntery. She has a good look at Lear, who is now covered in bandages. Sorry, look at that for a transition. She asks Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary to pull back his loincloth. I'm not really sure why that's a 2-man job, or why she's asking in the first place, really. The book says she showed no sign of pleasure or revulsion, but she picks up his member, which is such a horrible word, by the way. I couldn't even look at you when I said it. Moves it around a bit and then says she wishes she had her reading glasses on her. Eventually, it actually becomes clear that she was looking for signs of greenness, but that she can't see any. To be fair, I don't think it was a particularly thorough check, considering most of his body's bandaged up, but she tried, I guess. She's taking that as proof that he cannot be Elphaba's son. And she tells the Maunts that she will not tolerate any rumours that they are harbouring the son of a witch in their house. And that if they hear any gossiping among the other Maunts, they have to set them straight. She then makes her way down to the kitchen to find Sister Cook. Now, the thing is, I need to have a word with you about Sister Cook, because obviously I've been making all of the different Maunt puppets so that you can kind of tell which one they're meant to be. And so Sister Cook, I had her holding a wooden spoon, and because of the colour of the wooden spoon and the shape of it, it looked a bit phallic. So instead now she's holding a knife. And I just thought cooking until I had finished it and looked, and I thought, now she looks like an axe murderer. But anyway, or not an axe murderer, a knife murderer. There's like a courtyard outside the kitchen where they grow a load of their own food, and there are several Maunts kind of hanging out and socialising in that area. The Mauntery takes in a lot of teenage quadling girls, and if you can't remember from the first one, Quadling Country is the south, I think, region of Oz, which is mostly swampland. It's where Turtleheart came from in the first book, and the Quadling people are known for their red skin. Anyway, if a teenage Quadling girl is deemed either too plain or too outspoken for marriage, they seem to end up here. And a lot of them are given kitchen assistant roles, so they're all hanging out in the kitchen garden, harvesting, gardening, socialising, and kneading bread with their knees. Is that normal? Or is that something he's made up? What a weird thing to make up if it is. I don't think I want knee bread. Anyway, the superior Maunt is looking around for Sister Cook and she can't find her. So she's wandering around the garden asking people if they know where she is. And she's like minorly annoyed by one of the Quadling girls playing this like string instrument really badly. It's like a harp. But she mostly just ignores it and just keeps looking. An ancient Maunt shushes her, which she's very taken aback by because obviously she's the superior Maunt, and then says in a really low voice, "He's coming." Sorry. He's coming. Wait, I'm holding this one the wrong way around. Here we go. Not that it really makes much difference. She's very mysterious, you see. As this old woman stretches out her hand, we can see that she's got no fingerprints or like lifelines on her hand at all. This is the mysterious Mother Yakel, if you remember from book 1. And she hasn't really spoken in years, so for her to speak at all is quite a shock. Anyway, Yakel points to one of the trees just as a big red bird falls out of it. This is a crimson phoenix, if you couldn't tell. It's an incredibly rare and beautiful bird which have almost been hunted to extinction. And sorry, when I said phoenix, I actually meant phoenix, obviously. And he knows he's stunning. He's got quite a cocky attitude, to be honest. He tells the superior Maunt that he's been watching the garden for like the last hour or so, and he tells her, if you're looking for the talented one, this is the one for you. And he points to that girl who's playing that horrible bad instrument. Well, not bad instrument, but she's bad at it. And the Maunts are all confused because they think she's frankly anything but talented. The superior Maunt asks if he knows the boy who's been brought here, but he answers that he doesn't know any boys, which is something I relate to my core as someone who went to an all-girls high school. Turning her attention to the girl who is playing the harp as well, obviously. It's not actually a harp, it's a Domingan, which I'm pretty sure is a made-up instrument. And also I'm confused because on the audiobook, he pronounces it Domingan, but written down it looks like it would be pronounced Dominion, but we're going to pronounce it Domingan because that's how Gregor Maguire pronounced it. Gregor Maguire. Anyway, turning her attention to this young girl, she is apparently too beautiful to be a natural Maunt, so she must be a moron. One thing Gregory Maguire is going to do is insult every character. It is like walking down a high street with a boomer. He has got something horrible to say about everyone. The other girls explain that she's been there about 3 weeks, but she barely speaks apart from some like whispered prayers in a dialect that they can't understand. The superior Maunt goes back to the Phoenix and asks how long he plans on staying and how to be good hosts to him, because hosting is like one of their core values. But he tells them he was just passing through on his way to a conference, but the sound of the music had drawn him down in curiosity. Suddenly a snare comes down on the Phoenix and he screams. Sister Cook have been trying to catch him so she can turn him into Phoenix steaks for dinner. So maybe she does deserve the knife, actually. Both Mother Yakel and the superior Maunt have a really stern word with her and tell her, we don't eat capital A animals. So reluctantly, Sister Cook turns the snare over and the Phoenix explodes out of the garden without even saying goodbye, which is fair enough because they did just try and eat him. The superior Maunt then asks Sister Cook for more information about that girl. Her name is Candle, obviously. Why wouldn't it be? And she's been left here by her uncle, who said he'd come back for her in a year. She's good at working in the kitchen, but she hasn't really connected with the other Quadling girls, and she really doesn't speak much, if at all. The superior Maunt asks if she can take Candle for a different job, and Sister Cook is a bit put out, but she says that ultimately, as long as she takes the instrument with her so no one else can make that horrible noise, she's welcome to her. So just as they're leaving the garden, Mother Yakel asks, did you say there's a boy in the house? Did he bring back the broom? Sorry, she's got a very low voice. Let me do that again. Did you say there's a boy in the house? Did he bring back the broom? So she seems to know something about Lear, but the superior Maunt just walks straight past her. She gives her no attention whatsoever. And leaning on Candle's arm to help her balance, they walk up the big steps toward the infirmary. When they get there, the superior Maunt introduces Candle to Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary. She tells the two of them that she's got a new job for them, so they have more pressing issues to deal with now than continually monitoring Lear, who is still just completely unresponsive. Candle can sit there instead and practice her Domingan, and if Lear shows any changes whatsoever, she can go and find someone to help. Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary think that this is a terrible idea, and they're both in agreement, which is rare because they bicker over everything. They've heard about this girl and that she doesn't know enough to come in out of the rain, let alone take care of a patient in such a critical condition, but the superior Maunt is insistent. She tells them about the 3 young Maunts who Otzi found with their faces scraped off. Apparently they'd had 3 guests staying at the Mauntery just a few days before who matched their descriptions. So she wanted the sisters to leave the Mauntery on a mission to find out who did it and why. I love the smell of hot glue. It's not even hot anymore, but you know what I mean, like hot glue gun glue. Anyway, Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary are slightly terrified. They feel very out of their depth, but ultimately they have no choice but to agree. So they set out on their mission and they left Candle to watch Leah. She just looks at him really and focuses on playing her instrument, but I suppose it's not like he's doing much anyway. He's just lying there. She apparently knows that she is actually very skilled at playing the Domingan, but that it's missing a part, which is why it sounds so bad. Could never be her playing, obviously. But she wants to keep practicing anyway, and she's convinced that it will still have its effect, whatever that's supposed to mean. Now we're going to go back in time by quite a few years to Lear's memories from as soon as the first book ended, basically. So we're in Kiamo Co, the castle in the Vincus, which was previously owned by Fiyero and his family. Dorothy has just killed Elphaba by throwing a bucket of water over her, which was sort of not her intention, but it's done now. But Lear hasn't seen all this happening. Elphaba had locked him in the kitchen with Nanny to keep them safe, and by the time they managed to break the door down and chase Chistry up the stairs... Okay, I think we found the missing eye. Chistry's got no eyes. You can see where they used to be. Sorry, Chistry, I don't have my hot glue gun, so you've just got no eyes now. So they chase Chistry up the stairs to Elphaba's room, but by that point, Dorothy is already on her way down. She's holding the burned broom and she's sobbing, saying she's gone. Lear feels really sorry for her and also thinks she's really fit. So that's a great thought to be having about the girl who just killed your probably mum. Nanny goes upstairs to confirm what Dorothy's saying, but she won't let Lear go with her because he's still young and she's trying to protect him a little bit. She confirms Dorothy's story, comes back out into the corridor, locks the door behind her and starts muttering about religion, which Lear thinks is stupid because he's a skeptical teenager and he doesn't believe in any kind of religion. But actually, with Elphaba dead, his whole worldview has been kind of shaken up. And for the first time, he actually wishes he was religious because he doesn't really know who to turn to or lean on to figure out how to process this grief and also what on earth to do next, because he's just spent his whole life following Elphaba. And Lear's feelings towards Elphaba are really complicated. He's not sure if she is his mother or not, but either way, she is his very earliest memory in life and kind of his only constant. She had been cruel to him at times, to say the least, but ultimately she meant well. She's just not very maternal. And did she need to be, really? Why would she be if she wasn't his mum? And we don't know that, apart from the title of the book, but still. He asks Dorothy if he can have the broom to bury it with Elphaba, but she says she needs to take it as proof that she's killed her back to the wizard. So he starts thinking about what he's going to do next. Fiyero's family were kidnapped by soldiers in the first book, so now with Elphaba dead, he doesn't really have anyone else left, apart from Nanny, but he decides she's so old and confused, she's not really worth staying for. What a lovely boy. So Lear decides to go with Dorothy and her friends to the Emerald City. But on their way out, he catches sight of Elphaba's cape and he drapes it around his shoulders. It's far too big for him, but he doesn't care because it smells like her. I do feel really sorry for Lear. He is a bit of a strange boy and it's quite weird that he wanted to shag Dorothy just after he'd killed his mum, but he's had quite a hard life, really, hasn't he? So Lear, Dorothy, the lion, the scarecrow, the Tin Man, and Toto, who Lear thinks of as that little yapper, head off on their journey back to the Emerald City. They walk for days, and in that time, I don't know why I'm doing it like a puppet show, Dorothy asks Lear about his childhood. He can't really remember much, but he thinks that's probably normal, and it's probably just because not much memorable happened, because he is not special. He has real self-esteem problems. She asks about his parents and Lear says that he doesn't actually know for sure who either of them are, but that he has known Elphaba for as long as he can remember. It starts to rain really heavily, which stops their conversation in its tracks, and Lear is kind of secretly happy about that because he's not used to having these kind of deep conversations and he doesn't really like it. He's emotionally unavailable, but he's feeling quite vulnerable. The rain has put them all in a really bad mood and their sense of direction is a little bit shaky, so they're all starting to bicker. The lion suggests that maybe they should sing a song just to break the tension.
Does anyone want me to sing No One Mourns the Wicked before we go?
But they all shout no because it's so annoying when people do that, isn't it? I hate when people just break into song. Dorothy suddenly realizes that Toto is missing and she starts to panic, but the rest of them don't really care because they find Toto really annoying. They think he's a stupid, clueless creature. Right, hang on a minute. Justice for Toto. Nobody ever says anything nice about Toto. Literally not once in the whole book. Or the book before. And he's really done nothing wrong. And actually, in this instance, he really helps them out because he'd gone off to find somewhere to go to the loo and he's just finished weeing up the side of a shrine when they find him. And basically that shrine ends up being really helpful because they attach Elphaba's cloak to it, which is obviously completely waterproof because she's got that whole water thing going on, and suddenly they've got their shelter from the rain. So thank you, Toto. Everybody say thank you, Toto. Once they're sheltered from the rain, Dorothy asks Lear to tell her more about his upbringing, but Lear kind of dodges the question. But it does get him thinking, particularly about Nor, his potential half-sister, Fiero's daughter, who was kinder to him than he's maybe ever experienced from anyone else. He thought about the fact that even though he's technically always been clothed and fed, his life had ultimately been quite lonely. As the group sit in silence, the Scarecrow asks, "Have you ever noticed how the rain sounds like a Domingan?" Then a small animal burrows its head up from the ground beneath them. Right, just a quick note on this animal. I know these look a bit like boobs. I was going for paws in this position, but I am aware they look like boobs. At first, Lear thinks it's a badger or a beaver, but it turns out it's a mountain grite. Whatever a mountain grite is. Sorry, mountain grite. I think it's a fictional animal, I did Google it. And this mountain grite is fuming because the weight of them all sitting on the wet ground is affecting his home, which is underground. But he immediately recognises the witch's cape above them, which they're using as shelter. He assumes it must have been stolen from Elphaba, and he is absolutely furious. Dorothy just announces that she has killed the Wicked Witch, and the mountain grite literally falls over in disbelief. He's absolutely devastated. Dorothy says she thought he would be pleased. She can't understand why literally anyone would be upset about her killing the Wicked Witch of the West. But obviously, Elphaba had basically dedicated her whole life to trying to save the capital A animals from the wizards, horrible oppressive rules. So they were largely on her side. He tells Dorothy that most of the capital A animals think very fondly of Elphaba and they would have marched beside her against the Emerald City even if she'd believed in armies. He also calls the lion a traitor for not trying to save her. Lear pipes up and reveals that Elphaba was his friend, and the mountain grite doesn't really believe him because obviously he's already shown his side, so it's quite convenient of Lear to pipe up now. But he does warn him that once the news spreads of Elphaba's death, things could get really dangerous, the political unrest could get even worse. He calls Dorothy a thug, which you know what, I sort of agree with. I know she's meant to be naive, but she just really doesn't know how to read a room, does she? Anyway, they all set off again, trying to get to the Emerald City as quickly as they can before the news spreads. The next morning, the group run into some members of the Scrow tribe. It turns out they're trespassing on Scrow territory. They try to communicate with them that they don't mean any harm, but they don't speak the Scrow's language, so ultimately they don't get very far. And the tribe have got the group surrounded, so they've got no choice but to stop and see what happens, basically. But they're pleasantly surprised. They feed them and they don't cause them any harm. So Lear, Dorothy and the others ultimately don't put up much of a fuss. They just wait until after a day and a half of waiting, the Scrow leader arrives with a translator so they can finally actually speak to them. This is the translator. His name is Shem Otukos. He is very well educated. He went to Shiz Uni, and Lear straight up asks him for an audience with the leader. Here's another throwback to the first book. The leader of the Scrow tribe is Princess Nastoya, whose googly eyes are massive, so they make quite a loud noise. She's an elephant, an elephant, who had concealed herself in a human body when the Wizards' War on Animals began. She's now incredibly old and immobile, needing help to walk or even roll over. She seems to be in a lot of pain, and members of the Scrow tribe are constantly fussing around her, moving cushions and things, and doing whatever they can to make her more comfortable, but ultimately nothing really seems to be working. Every single times she's mentioned, to a point where it almost feels like a parody. Gregory Maguire writes that she is an absolutely huge, gigantic, massive monolith. That's my paraphrasing, but she's literally an elephant, so that's kind of a given, no? Apparently her nasal passages were large enough for the storage of melons. So there's a mental picture for you. I haven't included her nasal passages in the puppet, sorry, they wouldn't fit. She's really shocked to hear what had happened to Elphaba. If you don't remember from the first book, basically, Princess Nastoya had told Elphaba that if she ever needed her help, to send her crows over to her and she would come. She'd heard that Elphaba had sent the crows, but they'd been attacked on the way, so they'd never actually made it to the Scrow encampment. She also tells them that she's really worried about the political unrest in Oz since Munchkinland has now declared itself a free state. After the eminence of Munchkinland, Nessa Rose got killed by like a flying house or whatever. She thinks that the Vinkus should prepare to become independent too. But that would require the Scrow, the Unamata and the Arjikis all coming together in agreement. So she's been focusing on building an alliance with the Unamata, but it's not going particularly well. But she's really feeling the pressure to try and get it sorted quite quickly because she's heard rumours that the Wizards' army are setting up camp like just on the other side of the mountain, so they're getting closer. She then asks if Elphaba's murderer is in the room with them, which is quite a strange question to ask unless you know, but Dorothy literally jumps up and confesses, even though she does say that, you know, she didn't mean to do it, and even though the wizard had asked her to kill Elphaba, she actually had no intention of doing it at all, and the pail of water was a genuine mistake. It's an easy mistake to make, in fairness. You wouldn't assume that throwing water over someone would melt them, so I'll give Dorothy the benefit of the doubt on this occasion. She is still annoying though. Princess Nastoya tells them that in that case, they're in extreme danger. Not only has Dorothy killed the witch and stolen her broom, but she has done so in collusion with the wizard, which is very controversial. Lear stands up for Dorothy and he tells Princess Nastoya that it's not stealing if he is Elphaba's next of kin. She's confused because he doesn't look like Elphaba, as in, you know, he's not green. So she asks him to prove it, but he can't. She asks him about Fiero's family, and her wording of this is interesting. She asks if even the daughter is gone. Lear obviously picks up on that and asks if she means Nor, his potential half-sister, and what she knows about her, but Princess Nastoya just ignores the question. Several Scrow tribe members come together to help her stand up, and as she does, her hair, you're gonna have to use your, I didn't make the puppet accurate enough for this, you're gonna have to use your brain. Her hair gathers together and snakes off her body, and then so do her clothes. No further explanation on that one. So now she's completely naked and bald, except for her pubes. Gregory Maguire really makes sure to mention those. Lear has never seen a naked body before, and her body is sort of human even though her head is an elephant head, and Dorothy is literally retching at the sight of her, which is so rude, by the way, and Toto has passed out from the shock. Just the reaction I look for when I take my clothes off. Nastoya explains that she is stuck halfway between elephant and human. She disguised herself as an elephant to try and protect herself from the wizard, but she thinks she's dying of old age and she really wants to die an elephant. So she tried to change back, but she's gotten stuck in this kind of half state. She's really, really uncomfortable and she needs desperate help, but she doesn't really know who can help her or how. She was hoping on Elphaba, but obviously not now. Elphaba did owe her a favour, but since Lear is Elphaba's next of kin, she tells him that that's actually his debt to repay now. Lear tells her that he's got no talent for spells, and Nastoya asks if he's actually ever tried. Lear says no, he's not interested. Nastoya tells him to get interested, because this is his problem now. She doesn't care how long it takes, but he needs to figure it out and come back to her, because she can't and won't die half human, half elephant. It's not a request, it's an order. She says that if Lear really is a relation of Elphaba, then he'll figure it out like she always did. Dorothy pipes up and says, well, clearly not always, given her current status. Shut up, Dorothy, not now. Princess Nastoya bargains with Lear and basically tells him that if he comes back with a solution to her problem, in the meantime, she'll listen out for some news about Nor, so she's got something to help him when he comes back. She'll keep her ear to the ground, and her ears are pretty big. She's an elephant. Brilliant joke from me. So she lets them go and they continue their long journey. And Lear spends a lot of his time thinking about the fact that he kind of hated Elphaba when she was alive, but now that she's dead and she's left him all alone, he maybe hates her even more. Thinking about her just makes him feel really sad, and he just doesn't really know what he's going to do with himself now that she's left him all on his own. He's got like no life skills or experience at all in anything. So our poor little Lear is lacking some purpose. Finally, after a week of walking, they make it to the gates of the Emerald City. I was really impressed that I could literally find an Emerald City backdrop on Amazon, by the way. I thought I was going to have to work a lot harder than that. Lear has literally never seen anything like it before. He has never seen so many people or buildings in one place. So he's feeling a bit scared and overwhelmed. Dorothy tells him and the others to just act natural and blend in. But even from outside the gates, they can see some capital B bears being forced into manual labour. So it seems like the oppressive regime against the capital A animals is still in full swing, which makes the lion very nervous, understandably. The gates are guarded by a bunch of soldiers, but they are being distracted right now by a group of players with some puppets. They sound like absolute losers to me. Imagine being a fully grown adult playing with puppets. It's just embarrassing. So the group see this as an opportunity to sneak in past the guards and they slip straight through the gates. Immediately, Lear spots an alleyway they can all sneak down and hide in, but Dorothy's having a bit of a fit. They do follow him, but Dorothy's throwing a bit of a tantrum because she was expecting a bit more fuss for having killed the witch, a bit more pomp and circumstance, perhaps. I suppose the first witch she killed did warrant a whole song and dance, so I can see where she got the idea from, but also get a grip. The Emerald City seems really run down. There are lots of makeshift homes and everything just seems a bit broken. Dorothy's shocked and appalled because she didn't see this bit last time because she was escorted by the wizard's men, so she only saw the nice bits. The people all seem to be like cowering away from them, and Dorothy suggests they're probably just scared of them because they're too clean. Yeah, I'm sure after weeks of walking with no access to a shower, you are super clean. Get off your high horse. Lear thinks that maybe they're having an issue with police brutality and the people aren't sure whether they might be working for the Emerald City Home Guard, so they just keep moving, they don't bother anyone. And when they finally reach the palace, they're all really excited to have their wishes granted. Lear suddenly feels quite scared to meet the wizard, but also he's angry because ultimately this is the man who orchestrated Elphaba's death, and he also doesn't want to betray Elphaba, who would be horrified if she found out that Lear was going to have his wish granted by the wizard. He also feels nothing but an increasing exhaustion for Dorothy, and he is not the only one. Dorothy asks Lear what he thinks he will ask the wizard for, and he remembers having a really similar conversation once, but with Elphaba. At the time, his answer had been that he would ask for a father, but he thinks his answer would be different now. But like I said, he's still on the fence, he's quite nervous, but then Dorothy says he definitely deserves to have his wish granted because he's done so much to keep them safe. So she convinces him to come in with them, and he knows that the wizard probably wouldn't be able to give him a father or even a mother, but he hopes that he might be able to give him some news of Nor. Or maybe he might know what happened to Elphaba's grimoire, so he can use that to help Princess Nastoya to then help him find Nor. So they walk confidently up to the palace gate, and then Dorothy says, "I'm Dorothy, you know, the Dorothy." Sorry, just wait a minute while I roll my eyes. She's so annoying. The palace guards literally fall over themselves to help her, and they let the lion, the scarecrow, the tin man and Toto all through the gates without question. But when they get to Lear, they tell him he wasn't part of the original contract with the wizard and to piss off. Their words, not mine. Dorothy tells him she'll be back in less than an hour so they can decide how to celebrate together before she leaves Oz. Lear asks if he can go with her, but she tells him that he wouldn't feel at home at all in Kansas. So she kind of dismisses it, asks him if her pigtails are even, gives him a kiss, and then runs inside. Where on his body that kiss was never specified. Lear waits and waits for Dorothy to come back, but she doesn't show. And at first he had been pleasantly surprised by her kindness to him, but basically when she had then started showing that kindness to everyone, he got almost like offended. He thought it felt cheap and like he was just the next good deed, nothing special. He hated that she'd even cuddled that rank little dog of hers. He's being a dickhead, isn't he? Firstly, I personally didn't really read anything that made me think Dorothy was particularly nice to anyone. But let's just say she was, for argument's sake. You can't get annoyed with someone for being a nice person to other people, including you. Also, leave Toto out of this. He has literally never done anything wrong. The bells start ringing around the Emerald City, so Lear asks someone what's happening, and they tell him that the Wicked Witch is dead, the wizard has been deposed, and a good witch has been hired to oversee Oz while they find the next suitable ruler. So this is the point at which the Wizard of Oz ends, basically. But Lear is still hoping that Dorothy might come back for him. So he gets into this really sad little routine of begging for money and food during the day and then just returning to the spot where she left him at night, just in case she comes looking for him. On the 5th day of waiting, the Scarecrow comes to find him, and he tells Lear that Dorothy has gone home. He says, "A lot is going to change in a very short time. I hope it's for the best, but it could get ugly in the interim. I thought it smartest to let you know. If I were you, I would get out of town." Lear notices he's limping, which is weird for a Scarecrow, but tells him that no one knows he's Elphaba's child anyway, so he's not really in any danger. The Scarecrow tells him it's not so much that, but it's more that the change in leadership is going to mean that they're trying to clean up the Emerald City. They're going to gentrify it, basically. And then to demonstrate this point, he points down an alleyway where a small crowd of people are watching a couple of teenagers shagging on the floor, and they're like pelting them with bits of food and egging them on. Why they had to be teenagers, I'm not really sure. There's a baby crying, there are smashed bottles everywhere. The place is really in quite a state, basically. The Scarecrow tells Lear that Glinda is now on the throne temporarily, and Lear recognises his name from when Elphaba would talk fondly about Glinda, and he says that she'll do some good, but the Scarecrow says it takes strength to do good, basically implying that Glinda is like too weak of character to be able to really make any impression on Oz. He reaches down into his waistband and pulls out the charred handle of Elphaba's broom. So that's why he was limping. And he hands it to Lear. Lear can't really be bothered to carry it around, but he doesn't really know what else to do with it, so he does just take it. And the Scarecrow says that he thinks Glinda will try to gentrify the Emerald City because she likes things clean and tidy and she's quite vain, basically. But he hopes that in the long term, they might put a wise Scarecrow on the throne. Remember from The Wizard of Oz that the wizard granted the Scarecrow a brain before he left Oz, so he's feeling super wise right now. He insists that they should definitely leave the Emerald City. Now we're back in the Mourntree, and Candle has been playing the Domingan, badly obviously, for so long that her fingers have blood blisters. Lear is breathing shallowly but regularly, so that's good. We love regular breathing. Sister Cook comes up to the infirmary and makes like a snarky comment that Candle's basically sitting around doing nothing, and that Lear is not much to look at. In fairness, he's covered in bandages in a hospital bed, so I feel like she should probably cut him some slack. Sister Cook passes Candle a long red feather, and Candle is horrified, but the cook assures her it was a willing sacrifice. She tells her that when she was alone in the yard, the Phoenix had returned, but this time he was wounded and bleeding from the throat. He had clearly been attacked, but he couldn't speak. She says he pulled out his feather himself and carried it over to her. Sister Cook then heads off to cook Phoenix breast for dinner, which she's going to disguise as chicken fingers so the superior mont doesn't tell her off. Candle takes the feather and attaches it to the Domingan in like a slot that is perfectly sized for it. I couldn't really picture this. I don't know where it's supposed to be sitting. And then she begins playing again, except now the instrument sounds completely different. It actually sounds good.
She's really good.
So maybe she was telling the truth about it just missing a part. The book then says that she remembered her school days very vividly, particularly a moment when she had been 13 and suffering from her first menses, and that she'd spotted a red phoenix on the roof outside, which had cheered her up then, and it cheers her up now. Spoiler alert, the phoenix doesn't come back, it's literally dead, so her being on her period has no relevance whatsoever. And it's just another one of the many moments that I had when I was reading this book and the first one, where I'm left thinking, was that really a necessary detail to include about a very young character that has no bearing on the story at all, but it just makes me kind of question the writer's motives a little bit? I'm not going into it anymore. That's all I'll say. Right, we're at the end of a chapter, so let's take a little break. In most videos, this might be a good spot for an ad break, but I'm a nearly 30-year-old woman playing finger puppets in my dad's garage, so do you really think anyone would want to sponsor this? However, I do have an affiliate link for Audible, so I thought I would take a moment to talk to you about Audible, which is the audiobook platform that I actually use to listen to Son of a Witch and Wicked. And let me tell you, listening to the audiobooks of these books, it really is an experience. The Son of a Witch audiobook is actually read by Gregory Maguire. He puts on these accents, which are horrible, but it really adds to the ambience, you know, and there's like music playing in the background sometimes, again, for a bit of ambience. The audiobook itself is a whole experience. So if you are gonna read or listen to Wicked or Son of a Witch, perhaps consider an audiobook. I love listening to them in the car or like when I'm doing my other little tasks, cleaning and stuff like that, because it means those like boring long jobs don't feel quite so boring. I also love the Hunger Games audiobooks. I listen to all of those on Audible too. If you like these long form videos and you want me to be able to make more of them, I would really appreciate if you are going to sign up for Audible, if you would use the link in the description, even if it's just for the free trial, which you can cancel anytime. So, ad break that's not really an ad break, but sort of is an ad break over. Let's crack on. Back at the Montery, Candle continues to play the Domingan and watch over Lear. The Superior Maunt visits every day, but she can't really notice any positive change in Lear. He is still breathing though, so that's something. Candle actually thinks he might be responding slightly to the rhythm of her music, and she notices a pattern that if she plays slow music for too long, his breathing really slows down and vice versa. So we rejoin Lear in the past in the Emerald City. He is now in a stolen boat on the canal with the Scarecrow talking about Dorothy's speedy exit from Oz. They can hear a party going on in one of the nearby houses, and Lear is feeling very sorry for himself. He's a bit jealous that the Scarecrow got a nice new set of brains from the wizard when he has nothing and nowhere to go. He would really like to try and find Nor somehow, but he needs to try and earn some money first to take care of himself. You can't pour from an empty cup. They're like floating along, and then they come across this part of the canal which is really heavily guarded, and the Scarecrow tells Lear that this is the entrance to South Stairs, which is a high security prison where lots of the capital A animals were rumoured to have been sent after their arrest. There are all sorts of other criminals in there as well though, it's not like animal specific, but the Scarecrow thinks they might be planning a rebellion. Lear asks why they can't just let them out now that the wizard's gone, but the Scarecrow basically says that they can't be bothered to figure out who is actually in there for criminal offences versus who's in there because they're just an animal. So they're just being left in there to die, basically, and no one gets out of South Stairs alive. Lear seems quite keen to investigate or maybe even try and help them escape, but the Scarecrow, he's having absolutely none of it. So they turn the boat around and end up right by that house party from before. The Scarecrow thinks they might be celebrating the witch's death, and then he realises that it's actually Glinda's house. He tells Lear to hide his face, but Lear absolutely insists that she wouldn't know who he was anyway. He catches his first sight of Glinda in her tiara and notices her slumped shoulders. He wonders if that might be signs of grief over Elphaba, or maybe she's just bored. Glinda looks out just as they pass and she calls out to them. She says, "Who is it? Who's there? I almost thought... ... What? You almost thought Lear was Elphaba? Is that what we're implying? I think maybe. Anyway, Lear reiterates to the Scarecrow that Glinda definitely does not know who he is, and the Scarecrow says he'd better keep it that way. Now we come back to the present timeline where Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary are out on their mission trying to figure out who scraped off those young women's faces. Their first priority is to try and find the Scrow and the Unimata tribes to see if either of them have any idea of what's going on, or maybe whether they actually did it. They're both very scared. This is very much outside the realm of their day-to-day. They literally live in the Montery. They never really leave. But Sister Doctor is trying to put on a brave face, saying that they were probably chosen by the Superior Maunt because of their medical expertise, because it means that they can tend to each other if either of them get injured. So comforting. Fairly quickly, they spot the Unimata tribe in the distance, and when they get closer, basically it turns out that Sister Apothecary can speak Yumish. How convenient. It saves me time making another translator puppet, so fine. Although she can't speak it very well, so the tribe just find her quite entertaining. They are human, but with certain frog-like features, so they think maybe there was like an amphibian ancestor way back when. The Unimata are very skilled with knives particularly, and they'd make a very formidable enemy, but they don't seem to take too much offence from the presence of the Maunts, so that's a relief. Sister Apothecary manages to stitch together just about enough of their language to ask what they know about the scrapings, but the Unimata says they don't really know anything about it, but they assume it's something to do with the Scrow. And they think the Scrow might even be working with the Emperor, whoever this mysterious Emperor is. Heading back in time to join Lear in the Emerald City again, He tells the Scarecrow that he has a feeling Nor might be in South Stairs. It had been a good few years since she was kidnapped from Kiamo Co, and for most of that time Lear had assumed that she was dead along with the rest of her family, but Princess Nastoya didn't seem to think so, and if there is any chance of finding her alive, he feels like he needs to try, even if that means staying in the Emerald City for a little while longer. The Scarecrow realizes he is not going to be able to convince Lear to leave, so he says his goodbyes and warns, "I'm not in your story, Lear. Not after this." Which feels a bit on the nose, but it is true. He's gone now. Bye-bye. So Lear sits alone in the boat and waits until morning. And once the sun comes up, he visits the townhouse where he'd seen Glinda the night before. He knocks on this big, grand front door, and a houseboy comes out and tells him they don't do handouts and they don't have any jobs going. Lear tells him he's not after either of those things. He just wants an audience with Lady Glinda. The houseboy just laughs and calls him a simpleton. Glinda's been so busy lately, no one can get an appointment with her, let alone some random boy off the street. So Lear tells him to tell Glinda that the boy at the door has the witch's broom. But the houseboy doubts Lear's story, obviously, as you would, and tells him that he will only believe it's the witch's broom if Lear does magic with it. Obviously, Lear can't really prove anything, but he decides to try his luck and he raises the broom up above his head, and the houseboy is so terrified, he just runs inside and slams the door shut behind him. Lear hopes that he's made enough of a stir within the house, and he decides to just wait around for a bit until a few hours later when a housekeeper comes out and tells him that she's really pleased he's still there because Lady Glinda wants to see him. Apparently, when the houseboy had gone back inside, he couldn't help but gossip about what had happened, and word spreads fast, and Glinda had heard about it and she'd been really annoyed with him. She'd actually docked him a month's pay for being so silly, and she wanted to see Lear at once. So he is ushered inside and taken to clean himself up, and then through to a beautiful parlour room, which was unlike anything he's ever seen before. There's even a roaring fire, which confuses him because everyone outside is struggling and freezing. Glinda walks in. She is described as a decorated holiday tree tiptoeing in jeweled slippers. Lear thinks Lady Glinda is the best dressed person he has ever seen, and he's quite intimidated by her. He's comforted when he remembers that she was friends with Elphaba. Glinda introduces herself politely to Lear, and just as a side note for anyone who hasn't listened to the audiobook version of this, Gregory Maguire gives her an English accent. It's awful and also so random because she didn't have it in the first one. She asks Lear, "How did you come by the witch's broom?" And Lear tells her she can call her Elphaba in his presence, and Glinda visibly relaxes. He gets the broom out to show Glinda, but in doing that she also spots the cape in his bag, and she demands to know how he came across it. She calls him a thief and she threatens to have him thrown in South Stairs. Why the cape got that reaction but not the broom, I don't really understand. He defends himself, obviously, saying that he lived with her and he helped her, but he can't really bring himself to say that he's her son because he doesn't know that for sure. He asks Glinda for her help, and Glinda seems to catch on that he was and is quite fond of Elphaba, and says that she will do the best she can to help him with whatever it is that he needs in memory of Elfie. So Lear explains to Glinda about Fiero's missing daughter, Nor. And obviously Glinda also went to uni with Fiero, but they had no romantic connection, if you remember. Glinda says that if she can't help her friends, she would like to at least help their children. Something about the way she says it makes me think she's got a bit of an inkling about Lear as well. She doesn't have any children of her own. She says that's because Joffrey's too old and he's not interested in children. And eventually the conversation turns back to Nor, and Glinda says that if she has been in South Stairs all those years, she'll be really surprised if she's still alive. She doesn't have any record of everyone who's in South Stairs. She doesn't even know if one of those exists. And she would never realistically be able to help him get out of South Stairs. That's outside of her remit, even as this temporary Prime Minister government position that she's in. But she might know someone who can help him get in. It's not a friend of hers per se, but it is an acquaintance. We're back out in the mountains in the present day, and Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary have just parted ways with the Unimata tribe, and by coincidence, they have stumbled straight across the Scrow tribe. Well, that was easy. Their camp is absolutely huge. It's made up of over 1,000 Skro tribespeople, and each person has their different role. They're very self-sufficient. An ambassador comes to greet them, and he introduces himself as Shem Otakos. He's soft-spoken and he seems kind, but he's very well educated. Every single time Gregory Maguire talks about this character, he needs to make it clear he's very well educated, okay? The Maunts ask if he can arrange a meeting with the leader for them because they've got some important questions for her. So he starts to lead them that way, but he does warn them that Princess Nastoya is really unwell. She has little energy for matters that aren't considered urgent, and he just won't translate anything that he thinks might upset her because it's too risky. He also recommends that they breathe through their mouths because she reeks. And he says that she doesn't mind if you hold your sleeve up against your nose, but try not to gag in front of her because it upsets her. Which is fair enough. If only someone had told Dorothy that rule. Maybe that's why she created the rule. I love rules like that when they're like weirdly specific and they make you think, what happened here in order for this rule to have come about? Anyway, so they enter the tent. Princess Nastoya is huge, blah blah. She doesn't even blink, let alone speak, but Shem Otakos says that she acknowledges their presence, compliments them on their courage, and asks if there's any news of Lear. And the Maunts are really shocked to hear Lear's name mentioned so out of context, but Otakos explains that they'd assumed the Maunts had come to deliver news about the boy. Sister Doctor sets the record straight and tells him that they're there to investigate the scrapings and that it's got nothing to do with Lear. But both Otakos and Princess Nastoya seem completely disinterested in talking about the scrapings. So Sister Apothecary offers up some information about Lear to try and suck them in. She tells them that Lear's body had been found not too far away from where they are actually, just a few days ago, but that he's been attacked and he's currently at the Mauntery where they're hoping he'll recover from his injuries. Princess Nastoya finally takes an interest in what they're saying. She apologises for not standing up to greet them and explains the situation, that she's stuck between the two states, human and elephant, and that both sides seem to be dying of old age, so she's in a lot of pain. She says that she's entrusted Lear with a task and that she's been waiting 10 years too long. So that gives us kind of a time frame between this present day timeline and the other one where Lear is in the Emerald City and travelling with Dorothy, etc. Around 10 years between them. She asks if Lear's coming back to fulfill his promise, but Sister Doctor says that he's too unwell to travel at the moment and they don't know anything except for the fact that he was attacked by the same people as the Maunts who had their faces scraped. They're hoping that if they can figure out what caused his injuries, they might better be able to figure out how to treat them. Princess Nastoya says with absolute certainty that the Skro have had absolutely nothing to do with any of the scrapings. She suggests that they investigate the Unimata, but obviously we know they've already done that and they've kind of ruled it out. Sister Doctor is very familiar with the smell of death and she really notices it coming very pungently from Princess Nastoya, so she clearly doesn't have long left at all. She starts to cry and says that she wishes she could be scraped. I feel really sad for Princess Nastoya. It just seems like she's been in so much pain for such a long time. Sister Apothecary swoops in to try and help, and Shem Otakos tells her that this is an overstep, but she insists, and she starts asking the tribespeople for like a cocktail of things, including lemons, parsley fruit, and reduced vinegar. She starts moving Princess Nastoya's cushions around into a new formation, which will hopefully make her more comfortable. Now we're back in the Emerald City with Lear, and Glinda is guiding him around her townhouse, trying to find the kitchen, but she literally can't find it because she never goes in there. She opens one door to find two members of staff shagging. She laughs, she shuts the door, and then she locks it. She tells Lear that one of them is bound to be cheating, and basically she thinks it's hilarious that they're gonna have to like pound on the door until someone will open it and let them out, and it will like out their affair. Finally, she finds a kitchen where all of her house staff are there, and they are really shocked and a bit scared to see her. So they're all panicking.
Now I'm panicking.
Yeah,
Don't panic.
No, I am, because I'm going to lose my job.
I'm panicking, I'm gonna lose my job. But she just makes this like sarcastic remark, apologising for interrupting their meeting about how to poison her with arsenic or something. Oh, how to kill them in their beds, that's the one. Glinda is quite ballsy and sarcastic. I like her. She asks them to dress Lear in palace clothing so he can go unnoticed, clean him up, give him some food, and then bring him back to her. And once that's all done, the pair leave together in a carriage and they head towards the palace, which I assume is this thing. Glinda explains to Lear that her role right now is just to stand in for the mighty on their throne. She doesn't think she's necessarily deserving of the throne herself, and Lear asks if the mighty are deserving of thrones, and Glinda finds that funny because she thinks that's such an Elphaba question. She confesses that she's nervous and she doesn't really feel like she knows what she's doing, but also that she suspects that maybe everybody feels that way really, and that most people are probably just pretending to have it all figured out, which I do think is true, even more so as I get older. The conversation turns to South Stairs again because Glinda explains that there is a direct door to South Stairs directly from the palace, and it was built in secret so that they could send criminals straight down there after sentencing. She says that the prison is mostly underground and that most people only ever get one chance to leave, and that is in a body bag. Glinda pulls herself together, lifts her chin, grips her scepter, and glazes her eyes over as she steps out of the carriage and into her public persona, which is very different from her private one. Lear follows her out of the carriage in absolute terror, but no one questions either of them. They walk a long way through grand, winding corridors until eventually they reach an office where an elegant man jumps to his feet to greet Glinda. Lear doesn't need any introduction though. He immediately recognises this man as Commander Cherrystone. See, he's got a little cherry on his jacket just so we don't forget who he is. So this is the man who was responsible for kidnapping Fiero's whole family from Kiamo Co, but also Lear sort of looked up to him in a weird way, so it's complicated. Commander Cherrystone can't remember Lear at first, but Lear jogs his memory. He's quite aggressive and understandably so, but Cherrystone really keeps his cool and he just tells Lear that they took the family into protective custody to keep her safe from the witch. Lear responds by asking how well they'd protected them, but Commander Cherrystone, he's smooth and sarcastic, and he just brushes off Lear's questioning, telling him to stop spitting when he speaks. Lear feels quite betrayed that Glinda has brought him straight to Cherrystone, but Glinda absolutely assures him that she had no idea that they'd even met before, let alone what the connection was. But she tells him that holding a grudge won't get you anywhere, and basically he needs to get over it if he wants to find Nor. I would say Glinda's character here is the most similar from book to musical of all of them. She orders Cherrystone to help Lear get into South Stairs, and Cherrystone does agree. He says he can help him get in, but he cannot help him get out. Glinda then turns to leave, but she gets really upset because Lear reminds her so much of Elphaba, and she suddenly realizes that she might never see him again. But Lear comes in with his low self-esteem and says that he doesn't have Elphaba's talents, so he's literally not worth mourning. Glinda says that Elphaba's magical abilities were only a part of her true power, and that she was also really brave, and from what she's seen, so is Lear. For a second, he actually considers ditching his search for Nor and just staying with Glinda. You know, she doesn't have any children of her own. Maybe she would like to stand in as his mum or something. When I first read this, I was like, that's a really weird thing to think. But actually then Glinda has tears in her eyes and it kind of feels like maybe she's thinking the same thing. Lear says his goodbyes and Glinda tells him to do what he needs to do and not to forget Elphaba's broom. Now we cut to Candle and Lear in the infirmary again. It's nighttime and it's freezing. Candle has shut all the windows except one. Oh, she's lost her Domingan. There you go. Have that back. Yeah, she shut all the windows except one which won't close, so she's covering it up with blankets, doing everything she can to try and keep the room warm, but nothing's really working. When she turns back to Lear, his skin is colder than ever and his blood pressure's really dropping. I don't know how she can tell that from looking at him, but I'm not a doctor myself. She turns to leave the room to find help, but then absolutely jumps out of her skin when she sees a cloaked figure standing in the only doorway. It's Mother Yakel, and she tells Candle, you can't leave. There is no one else here to do what needs to be done. Like it's some sort of prophecy that she needs to fulfill or something. Candle picks up the Domingan, ready to give Yakel a whack. But Yakel jolts back into the shadows and locks the door behind her. Candle throws herself against the door to try and open it, but it doesn't work. So she gives up on that idea and turns around to try and figure out if she can save Lear by herself. This feels like a real medical emergency at this point. And she's surrounded by all this medical equipment, but she has no idea how to use any of it, so she's really panicking. So she takes off her tunic and waves it out the window in the hopes that someone might see her from the courtyard. A strong gust of wind picks up the tunic and takes it out of her hands and blows it away. Oh, I hate it when that happens. Now, I'm not really sure why this is her next port of call, and I'm very squeamish, so I'm going to try not to faint when I tell you this. But she takes a pen and cuts into his arm, gets some of his blood into a mortar, runs over to the window and like tips it out. Just like onto the floor outside, I think. I'm not too sure on the logistics, to be honest. But she says it's a blood offering to the moon. And then she does that 2 more times just in case the moon wasn't listening the first time. Going back in time again to the Emerald City, Lear is now alone with Commander Cherrystone, who is pretty much just ignoring his existence. He's like reading his newspapers and humming. And Lear's quite shocked at his ability to just keep cool, calm and collected, despite all of his questioning about his family, who Commander Cherrystone literally abducted. He is just completely unbothered. Eventually, a young man arrives. He's quite annoying in temperament. He chatters away, asking Lear to feel the weight of his clothes and asking if Cherrystone has any food, like maybe a crumpet. And fair enough, actually, crumpets do bang, but he is annoying. Commander Cherrystone explains that this is the young man who will be taking Lear down to South Stairs and doing the best he can to help. He doesn't seem particularly hopeful though. He says he knows he's got his mind on other matters, but he does ask him to try his best. The man then says that Lear looks too wet to be after the same thing as him down in South Stairs, and Commander Cherrystone replies he may grow into a sexual nature before he emerges, if he ever does. Sorry, what is going on here? Cherrystone finally introduces Lear to this man, and this is Shell, as in Elphaba's brother. See, because he's got shells on his jacket. Do you see those? My brain was working that day on my finger puppets. As in Lear's probably uncle, and he's a creep. So Shell and his probably nephew Lear leave Cherrystone's office, and Lear is desperately wondering if Shell has ever heard of him, but he doesn't give any indication that he knows who he is. Neither of them do. Shell reveals this secret door, which he unlocks, and behind it is a huge descending set of dark stairs with no railing. Lear asks Shell if that's how South Stairs got its name, but Shell says he's never really thought about it. He's really not got much going on up there. Also, in my head, his face looked exactly like Preminger from the Barbie Princess and the Pauper movie.
Why, hello.
Lear can't resist asking Shell, all about his infamous sisters. You'd have to ask, wouldn't you? He asks if Elphaba was a martyr, but Shell replies that in order to consider either of his sisters martyrs, he would have to have some sort of faith himself, and he doesn't. He's an atheist. And he also just doesn't really want to get involved. He says that it took all the dancing around he could do to avoid being called a traitor because of family associations, but luckily he's got lots of contacts in the government and he's very good at dancing. He's so slimy. They carry on walking for what feels like miles down the damp, dark steps in silence. They stop to pick up some clubs to set them on fire so they've got their own light source. It's really dark down there. And Shell tells Lear to make sure he gets his own and keeps it with him for when they separate, which obviously terrifies Lear because he's in an underground prison. He doesn't know where to go. He asks how he's supposed to find his way out if Shell isn't with him anymore, but Shell says it's basically not his problem and no one gets out of South Stairs alive anyway, so he should basically just give up. Lear silently makes the decision that he wants to stick to his uncle like glue, no matter what Shell thinks. So eventually they arrive in what seems less like a prison and more like a damp, dark, underground city. Lear can hear carts, voices, a stringed instrument playing a long way away. He can smell bacon. There are signs of life. So he asks if Shell could help him find Nor, but Shell replies that he's got his own stuff to be worrying about, and he has promised to take him to the Undermayor's office, but he's got a few stops to make first. He has medication in his satchel, like loads of it, which seems a little bit out of character, but maybe I've read him all wrong. He wants to drop off the medication to the people who need it, but he promises to take Lear afterwards. That pisses Lear off a bit, as we learned from his situation with Dorothy. He hates it when people are nice to other people, but he is determined to stick close by Shell, so he just sucks it up and follows him anyway. There is a network of canals which absolutely stink of poo, and they seem to have cells like directly off them. That's how I read it anyway. So like the prisoner could open the cell door, but it's just water. so they couldn't go anywhere. So Shell and Lear board a boat and row further and further into this big stinky canal. Shell seems to be getting actively cheerier the further in they get, and then eventually they dock the boat up next to one of the cell doors. Shell tells Lear that he's had his boat stolen a couple of times before on his errands of mercy, so he asks Lear to wait with the boat while he goes and gives the medication to the patient. He tells Lear that he finds it humbling to be able to help those who suffer, and then he takes a syringe out of his bag and walks through the cell door, closing the door behind him. Lear tries to peek under the door, and he can vaguely see the shadow of like a female prisoner who is like whimpering and moaning and tucking her feet in underneath her skirts. He watches Shell get closer to her and then panics because he can hear someone coming. He turns to see a big ape holding a ring of keys. He asks Lear why he's laying on the ground, and Lear kind of dodges the question, but he tells him that he has permission from Lady Glinda to visit and that he's just waiting for Shell to finish tending to the needs of the sick. The ape says, yeah, I bet he is, and then tells Lear that he doesn't actually care what Glinda says. They run their own society down in South Stairs, completely separate from any of Glinda's influence, but he does ask if he's had permission from the Undermayor. Lear explains that they are on their way there, but Shell obviously had to do these stops first. But the ape is having none of it. He insists that Lear follows him, and Lear is too scared to put up much of a fight, so he does start following him, but he also shouts back for Shell, who comes running out from the cell and tells the ape to leave Lear alone. The ape asks if he's given the prisoner her weekly jab, but Shell says that he was interrupted before he finished, so he'll just have to move on to the next one. He tells the ape to leave them alone, and the ape does step aside and allow them to carry on their journey, but he does tell Lear to watch his back. As they row away, Shell explains to Lear that basically when everything was going on with the wizard and the capital A animals, the ape had agreed to work for South Stairs and bully his own to save his own arse, basically. Lear's getting quite antsy at this point, and he asks how long until the Undermayor's office, but Shell says he still has 2 or 3 stops to make first. He says there are lots of prisoners who are absolutely desperate for his help, so he tries to make it as fair as he can, but he has to pick and choose really carefully. He carries on his missionary work, and Lear stays in the boat, but he can hear the prisoners screaming and crying, and he assumes they must be in a lot of pain. Eventually, they reach the Undermayor's office. This is the Undermayor. His name is Chide. Do you like his sideburns? He's very pale, as if he hasn't seen the sun in decades, but he's very blingy. He's decked out with rings on every finger. Chide and Shell gossip a little bit about Glinda, basically doubting her abilities to rule Oz effectively and saying she doesn't have 2 brain cells to rub together. And then Shell introduces Lear to Chide, and Chide gets a bit confused and refers to Shell as Lear's dad, but Lear really quickly corrects him. He apologises, saying he thought he could see a resemblance. Weird that. Shell explains to Chide that he said he would help Lear search for a prisoner, and Chide says he might be able to help for a price. But Shell tells him to fuck off. And he basically blackmails him, saying that if Chide won't agree to help Lear free of charge, he'll report his side business, whatever that means. It seems to work though, because Chide immediately asks for Nor's name and description, which Lear obviously gives him. And then he starts rummaging around through books and files to find any information he might have on the girl. He asks Shell if he's given her any medication, and Shell says that she's too young and he does have some standards. And then the penny drops for Lear, and he realises that Shell is actually going around drugging these prisoners and raping them. He confronts Shell about it, but Shell's not remotely fazed or even ashamed. He says he provides the women with comfort and that he's basically doing them a favour. Lear is absolutely disgusted by this discovery and says Shell is monstrous, but Shell just laughs and says he'd need to be a good sight more ambitious to make it to monstrous. I told you, he's slimy. Slimy's actually a massive understatement. In that moment, Lear decides there is no way he's staying with Shell, which is fine by Shell obviously, but he says he's sure they'll meet again, probably still in South Stairs, because realistically, Lear is never getting out alive. Super quickly, we're going to jump forward in time to check in with the Maunts and Candle, starting off with Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary. They are still with the Scrow, still tending to Princess Nastoya, and they have actually made her far more comfortable and provided better care for her than her staff could, and they've kind of started to step on some toes. Some of the tribes people are getting quite annoyed. The Scrow are really proud people, and they're also quite suspicious of foreign medical practices. So once the princess is asleep, they ask the Maunts to leave, implying that things might get quite nasty if they don't. Sister Doctor objects, saying she thought the scroll was supposed to be hospitable to strangers, but Shem Otakos, the translator, says they've been there a few days now, so they're not really strangers anymore. He says he will send an escort with them to try and prevent them from getting their faces scraped or anything crazy like that, but that they really do have to leave now. But just before they do, Princess Nastoya wakes up and asks for one last conversation with them. She asks them to go back to the Mauntery, collect Lear, and bring him back to her in the hopes that he might be able to help her. The Maunts explain that they don't even know if they'll be able to convince him to come once he wakes up, because they've never even met him conscious. Like, they have no idea what his personality is like or what his plans were. So she tells them to tell him that she has some information from the Emerald City that he might want to hear. Shem Otakos escorts the Maunts out of the Scrow encampment, and Sister Apothecary is actually quite offended that not more of the Scrow have come to say goodbye, considering everything they've done for their princess. But Otakos tells them that the tribe is staying indoors because they've seen something circling around in the skies, and the Maunts assume that he means vultures, sensing Princess Nastoya's imminent death and just like waiting. But he corrects them. Plot twist: dragons. Shem Otakos warns them to be careful, and then after they leave, he thinks to himself that he does really hope that they manage to bring Lear back, but also he doesn't believe in the unnamed god and he doesn't know them, so he doesn't really care about them. How lovely. We're going to cut over to Candle, who is doing her absolute best to scream as loud as she can for help, but it's just not working. She can feel Lear's heart lurching and his breathing is slowing right down, so she holds his face and she kisses him. Personally, I think kissing an unconscious person who's never actually met you is like quite strange. So I'm hoping that Gregory Maguire means like a CPR kiss of life kind of way, but it's not specified. Okay, back to South Stairs. Chide tells Lear he's found something for him, but he can't go any further with a firearm, which confuses Lear. He's got no idea what he's talking about, but then he realizes he's got that burnt end of the broom in his bag, and Chide thinks it's a gun, which it isn't, obviously. So he gets it out to show him, but then he realizes it's not actually just a burnt stump anymore. There are like leaves shooting out of it and it seems to be growing, which Lear didn't even realise was possible. So he's understandably really shocked because he didn't even know it could grow. He was just sort of carrying it around for the sake of it. Chide is now satisfied though that it's not a gun, and he tells him to put it away because some of the prisoners in South Stairs haven't seen a green leaf in 20 years. So they might get a bit weird if they see it. So he tells Lear to hide it. Lear and Chide go even deeper into South Stairs. I'm not really sure on the logistics of this place, like the layout, because every time anyone moves anywhere, Gregory Maguire seems to just say that they're getting deeper, but they reach the part which seems like the oldest. Everyone's quiet and seems quite depressed, and for the first time since arriving in South Stairs, Lear realises that he can't even hear any music playing. They head down yet another set of winding steps, but this time Chide tells Lear to prepare himself for quite a stench because now they're heading into the animal district. Lear doesn't care about the smell or anything else really. He's really excited to finally be reunited with his half-sister and friend. They meet a pig who is lying in some straw, trying to warm up some piglets who all seem to be dead except one. She knows Nor, but she tells them that Nor's not there anymore. Chide points out that it's a weird place for them to have put a human girl, because obviously this is the animal district, and the pig says she had some developmental problems, so the lodgings coordinator had placed her with the animals because he didn't think she'd be as offensive among them. To be fair, most of the capital A animals we've come across in this series so far have been really nice and friendly and quite intelligent, far nicer than most of the people, so I'd rather be put with them personally. The pig tells them that a few days ago, on the same day that the wizard was forced out of Oz, 2 horned hogs who were imprisoned down at South Stairs decided to make the ultimate protest. They wanted to highlight the wizard's crimes against capital A animals and their own poor treatment down in South Stairs, and they entered into a suicide pact. The 2 hogs stood outside the door that they would have gone through had they been up for slaughter, and one of them killed the other and then killed himself. The neighbours had left the bodies for as long as they could stand it in solidarity with the cause, but eventually they'd alerted the guards who had carried the bodies away, up and out of South Stairs. She tells them that Nor had sneaked up to the carcasses and pulled them over her to conceal herself in the hopes that she might get carried out with them, and it's worked. It's like a gruesome version of when Annie gets out of the orphanage by hiding in Mr. Bundle's laundry cart. I love Annie, and I never get to talk about it, so sorry. The pig says that she hopes Nor was smart enough to plug all of her valves before she did that, because the entrails of horned hogs breed a special type of maggot that like to burrow into human orifices. Orifices mentioned again. That's twice now. Can we go for 3? Leah had gone pale and was having a bit of a panic attack. Imagine knowing that your half-sister, who you thought was dead, wasn't dead and was here a few days ago, but she's not here now, and you're probably trapped in that prison for life. I understand why he's having a panic attack. That is really a lot to take on board. Anyway, Chide tells him that he should be pleased Nor's escaped, actually, because realistically, he was never going to let her go. What an absolute snake. As if he was going to say no, even if they found her. Arsehole. Speaking of arseholes, he then grabs the only piglet which is alive and hurls it against a beam, killing it instantly. I actually couldn't even bring myself to make a little piglet puppet because that upset me so much. He says that's the pig's punishment for not telling him about Nor sooner. Lear runs off away from Chide, but he gets completely lost. He can see the dark, starry night above. Not really sure how, because obviously the whole point in this place is that it's entirely underground, but okay. He feels like he has nothing to live for, nothing to look forward to, and nowhere to go. He's absolutely distraught, bless him. And without thinking, he takes the broom out of his satchel, throws his leg over it, and flies straight up into the night sky. Quickly back to Candle and Lear. Lear is still about to die. He's really knocking on death's door. And Candle is still, that she's kissing him. She's taken her underskirts off to wrap them around his head to try and keep his brain alive, obviously. Again, I'm not a doctor. The book says she kissed him and licked his eyelids as a cat might, trying to open them. I'm sure that's gonna work, yeah. We're then left with this description of Candle stretched naked upon him like a wife. Probably because she's been taking off all her clothes and chucking them out the window. It's heavily implied that she sleeps with Lear, who is still actually unconscious, by the way. That is just absolutely not all right. And then as soon as that's over, we hear a key in the door and Mother Yakel swings the door open and she's grinning like an absolute mad woman. Lear seems to have come back to life as well. He stirs and sighs and his eyelids are twitching and his fingers are twitching. It seems like he's actually finally waking up. Are they implying that the non-consensual sex saved his life? Is that what we're doing here? I read a Reddit thread about this and it seems like some people did read it that way. I didn't the first time around, but then actually when I went back and read it again, I was like, yeah, that kind of is what it sounds like, isn't it? It really does seem like Yakel locked them in there to make that happen and just waited outside listening until the deed was done. Who even is Mother Yakel? She was weird in the first one. This is something else. Anyway, by the time Sister Doctor and Sister Apothecary finally arrive back at the infirmary, Candle and Lear are both gone. Having flown away from Southstairs, Lear is having a bit of a finding himself moment. He's letting himself feel hurt for the first time and it feels really raw, but he doesn't really know what to do with it all. Someone send this man to therapy. He's grieving the fact that he hasn't been able to find Nor, but he's also really impressed that he actually just managed to fly that broom, and he's having the time of his life just whipping around. But eventually the broom brings itself down on some cobblestones in the Emerald City. So Lear's wandering around. He's got a real spring in his step actually, for probably the first time in his whole life. He goes to look for Glinda, hoping that she might be able to get him a meeting with Commander Cherrystone so he can ask him about what might have happened to Nor after she left Southstairs, or maybe she might be able to give him a job as a boot black, or maybe she might like to be his mum, you know, whatever takes her fancy really. He wants to use her as a bit of a jumping off point basically to figure out what to do next, but the houseboy tells him that she's gone to her country house and she's not there. Lear isn't really fazed though. He is just so excited to figure out what he's going to do with the rest of his life. It's like he's literally just realised that he has free will. The book says he could commit a crime or banter with fellows on the street or wink at a girl and catch a kiss, and that's so true. He could do any of those things, but instead he heads towards a church to ask the unnamed god what he thinks he should do, which is literally the opposite of free will, by the way. Just eat a whole cheesecake first or something. So he goes to a church service, but halfway through, one of the ushers thinks he looks too scruffy basically and throws him out onto the street. So he wanders the streets, just kind of looking for something to do. He finds a load of urchin children and he teaches them to sing hymns about the unnamed god. And honestly, when I was reading it for a minute, I thought he was going to go down the cult leader route, but he didn't. He goes to a few different inns and taverns and tries to find out if there are any jobs going. Basically just anything that might give him a little bit of money and a little bit of purpose. But he can't find anything. So after a few days of like just trying and trying and trying, he's hungry, he's cold, he's tired, and his enthusiasm is starting to dip a little bit. He also asks literally anyone he can find if they have heard of Nor or seen anyone who looks like Nor, but that doesn't bring up anything useful either. He can't really figure out what to do, so he considers going back to Princess Nastoya, but he hasn't actually learned anything that would help her either, so he decides against that. And he realizes that pretty much the only people in the Emerald City who aren't struggling for like food or shelter are the Emerald City Home Guard. So he decides he wants to join the army. So he goes to their barracks, as you can see, army barracks, and sort of loiters outside for a few days, scoping it all out. One day it starts really aggressively hailing, so everyone runs for cover, and Lear finds himself taking shelter in a doorway with just one soldier. They chat for a bit, and the soldier gives some advice about how and where to apply and what to say in the interview to impress the officers. He says, whatever you do, don't tell them that you don't know who your parents are, because that will just make you look like a spy or something. Instead, tell them your parents can't keep from screwing, so they've just had their 12th baby and they're kicking you out of the house to make space. So Lear follows the soldier's advice and it works. He gets into the Emerald City Home Guard and it all seems a bit too good to be true. He's got a smart new uniform. This is Lear in his uniform now, and he has a sense of purpose, although he tries to keep his distance from the other soldiers because he does want to have a little bit of a sense of anonymity. He doesn't want them asking too many questions. But one morning while he's working in the kitchens, he spots Commander Cherrystone arriving at the barracks. So Lear makes his excuses to stay nearby and watch him from a distance. He seems really tired. He's speaking in low tones with a sergeant and reviewing a construction site, but Lear's not sure what they're supposed to be building. He eventually does approach Commander Cherrystone and he politely reintroduces himself, but Cherrystone seems really distracted and Lear can't even actually tell if he remembers him. He reminds Cherrystone of who he is and the Nor situation and asks if he has heard anything about where Nor might be, but Cherrystone answers kind of vaguely, saying he's got a lot on his plate at the minute and he'll let him know if he hears anything, but he's very non-committal. Months pass and Lear goes about his daily duties, mostly in the kitchen, but he's always keeping an eye on these soldiers who are building this like mystery massive new structure, and even the other soldiers seem to speculate over what it's going to be, but nobody knows for sure. They wonder if it's going to be barracks for a load of new troops or warehouses for the defensive artillery they're going to need. Basically, all of the political tension is making them think that war must be imminent, and therefore they're assuming that this building must be something to do with that as well. Lear often thinks about what separates him from the other boys in the barracks. They are interested in whores and scores. His words, not mine. But Lear feels very different to them. He thinks he is quite dull, but he also thinks that hanging around with Elphaba for so long might have given him something special, but he can't work out what that is yet. When he thinks about that broom incident, he's pretty sure that he doesn't actually have any magical abilities and that the broom had been in control, not him. But he was beginning to believe that he might not be completely stupid like he had previously thought, and that maybe he just hadn't been given the opportunity to learn, which is fair enough because he's never had any formal education. Months later, once the building is complete, it's revealed to be a Unionist basilica. It's Laleenmas now, which is their version of Christmas, and all the boys receive presents from home, except for Lear. They hold church services in this new basilica, and Lear seems to take a real interest in unionism for the first time ever. The priest talks about how the morals of the day are really slipping, and most of the boys just sort of fall asleep, but Lear seems really taken in by it. The priest also mentions in passing that there's a crematorium nearby, and based on what he says about it, Lear thinks that might be where the horned hogs from Southstairs went after they died. So Lear starts mentioning to his higher-ups that his fake parents are fake sick, so they give him permission to leave for a few days and take his family a loaf of bread and some coins. But instead, he heads straight for the crematorium to see if he can find any information about Nor. He doesn't find anything, but he doesn't give up hope. If, even after all those years in captivity, Nor was still brainy enough and ballsy enough to break out of Southstairs, Leah feels pretty confident she can keep herself alive until he finds her. He just needs to keep looking. He considers going to find Princess Nastoya while he's free for a few days, but when he thinks about it, he hasn't really actually learned anything that might help her, and he figures she's probably dead by now anyway. It's been quite a long time and she was really unwell. So he goes back to the army, and there's this strange paragraph where basically Leah says that the priest keeps telling them how to pray but never how to do it. So he's trying to pray, but he ends up wanking instead. Easy mistake, really. This video is once again absolutely destroying my digital footprint. Overall, Leah thinks the army is good for his character. It's teaching him discipline, it's giving him purpose. He's learning how to hold a rifle and run at the same time, how to shoot, how to march in formation, all those critical life skills, you know? Oh, and also how to wear his hair saucily to thrill the maidens on the pavement. Okay, my king's having a glow up.
Take this and give you
a princess.
One morning, the soldiers are told to wash themselves and report for duty. They're told that they're going to be accompanying Lady Glinda and Lord Chuffrey into a ceremony where they're being thanked for their service and relieved of their duties, which must mean they found a new ruler. Lear gets quite excited to see Glinda again, mostly because he wants to ask her if she's heard any more about Nor. But when Glinda greets the soldiers, she doesn't seem to recognise Lear at all. He doesn't know much about current affairs, so he doesn't know whether Glinda has chosen to abdicate the throne or has been forced off, but she is being replaced by the Scarecrow. Lear seems a bit confused about whether it's the Scarecrow he knew from before or a different one, but the Scarecrow doesn't seem to recognise him either. So Lear goes to bed feeling really isolated and alone and forgotten. 2 years pass and nothing has really changed for Lear at all. He stays in the army, mostly keeping himself to himself, but he does join in a little bit more with the social side. He gets satisfaction and purpose out of his work assignments, and he's known as a really good listener, even though that's mostly just because he doesn't want anyone to ask questions about his family or lack thereof. Sometimes the soldiers are given time to go and see their family, but Lear never takes his, he just stays there. He's invited to go and stay with another soldier's family at some point, and he does plan to go, but basically the night before they leave, that soldier keeps talking about his wife and children and how lovely they are and how much he loves them and they love him and they're so proud of him, and Lear just doesn't want to hear it. He gets too jealous and he doesn't want to go, so he cancels. A few weeks later, a gun goes missing from the artillery cabinet, so Lear books an appointment with the commander to tell him that he knows who did it. He blames the man with the lovely family, and the man is put into solitary confinement for a few days, but when he doesn't confess, they dishonorably discharge him. But before the man makes it home, he kills himself because he can't face disappointing his family. The missing gun is found eventually. It had just been put in the wrong cabinet, but nobody really talks about it, and Lear doesn't face any consequences. Sometimes I feel really sorry for Lear, and other times he just seems evil. I suppose that's the whole point of Wicked though, isn't it? Like, the idea that you can be both and that most people are neither one or the other. A couple more years pass, so Lear has been in the army for like 4-ish years now. With time, his memories of his previous life have faded, and he does his best to push away any emotions that come along when he thinks about Elphaba or Nor. And he still keeps Elphaba's cape and broom stuffed right at the back of his locker in secret, but he doesn't really think about her much anymore. One day, Lear and his company are pulled into a meeting and told that they are finally shipping out, but they're not sure where to. They're allowed one last night of freedom, but if anyone isn't back by roll call in the morning, there will be serious consequences. So Lear decides he's gonna be a bit crazy. He's gonna go out for a beer with the boys. They pick a tavern which is known for good food and good women, and the word has already spread about the soldiers being deployed. So the tavern is already filled with, and I quote, bamboozlers, shady ladies, and spies. Sounds like a good time to me. Because basically the soldiers were known for dropping money, their trousers, and hot gossip. Lear, as usual, keeps himself to himself, but he's quite enjoying people watching, getting a little bit tipsy. On his way to the toilet, he literally bumps straight into another soldier who he immediately recognises as the guy who gave him the advice on how to get into the army in the first place. and he recognises him as well, and he introduces himself as Trism von Cavalish. Lear thanks Trism for his advice all those years ago and asks what his role is because he's never actually seen him around the barracks. Trism says he works in the development of defence and specifically animal husbandry. Lear isn't sure if he means animals or animals, but either way, all the beer he's been drinking is suddenly catching up with him and he's all of a sudden very drunk. So he steps outside for some air and Trism follows him. In the street outside, they bump into Shell. He hasn't changed one bit, he's just as slimy as ever. He tells Lear that everyone in South Stairs was really confused by his disappearance, including the Undermayor Chide, and they all kind of assumed he must have either drowned in the lake or even melted. Lear is barely making any sense because he's so drunk, but he does manage to tell Shell that he still wants to find Noor. And Shell says that Noor had actually turned up somewhere, but he can't remember where. It might have been Shiz, maybe? He isn't sure. Then Shell disappears into a nearby building and slams the door behind him, helpful as ever. Trism hails a cab for Lear, helps him in, and then sends him off back to the barracks. And while he's travelling, Lear obviously is really drunk, but he spots some graffiti that says Elphie lives, and it feels weirdly familiar to him for some reason. So between that and obviously his really frustrating conversation with Shell, he feels a sudden urge to jump out of the carriage and go and look for Noor, but he's too drunk to do anything. Oh, Trism's meant to be gone. Sorry, Trism, bye-bye. So instead, he crawls out of the carriage and into bed, struggling to remember whatever even felt so important in the first place. The next morning, the memories kind of come back, but he's still too hungover to be able to make any real decisions or really think things through. So he reports for duty and sets off, led by Commander Cherrystone, who tells them they're heading south into Quadling country. And Lear can hear the soldiers chatting about what they know about the Quadling people. The book says they're known for their muddy complexion and fishy odour. Nice. We know that they have red skin like Candle and Turtleheart from the first book, and that the environment is hot and swampy. The Quadling people are sort of seen as lower in status than a lot of the other people of Oz. They walk for days, and eventually Lear finds himself in conversation with a few of the other soldiers. They tell him about a secret mission going on within the Emerald City Home Guard, which is supposed to be hush-hush, but everyone seems to know about it. Apparently, a special team have been breeding dragons for a few years now. Lear's really shocked and doesn't believe them at first because he always thought dragons were mythological creatures, they weren't real. But one of the soldiers says he's literally seen them with his own eyes and they're really vicious and hard to control. The head dragon trainer is none other than Trism von Cavalish, Lear's soldier friend from the pub. And apparently he's very persuasive. Anything he tells the dragons to do, they do without question. The next morning, they carry on their journey and the ground gets wetter and swampier with every step they take. They still couldn't really work out why they'd been deployed though. There were no obvious signs of unrest or conflict. If you hate feet, you're gonna hate this, but I'm so sorry. If I have to hear it, then so do you. They reach a bit of land which is all drier than the rest, so they all take their socks off to itch between their toes. To be specific, the book says, flakes of wettish skin billowed before being borne away. It almost looked like snow. Listen, if that's not going to sell this book to you, I don't know what will. They approach one of the largest cities in Quadling country, which is called Koya, and has so far avoided being taken over by the wizard, or the Emerald City in general. They speak a different language to the soldiers, called Qua'ati, but the soldiers haven't brought a translator with them. Commander Cherrystone tells the soldiers to do their best to learn the language in a matter of weeks, which makes Lear wonder how long they're actually supposed to be there. Right, so now we finally figure out why they've been sent to Koya. The Emerald City had sent a viceroy, is that how you say that word? Viceroy, to oversee Koya and basically keep an eye on the Quadling people. But the viceroy and his wife have both been kidnapped. No one in Koya admits to knowing what happened to them, but the Scarecrow's cabinet have insisted that the army go out there to investigate, try to keep the peace, befriend the locals, and hopefully figure out who kidnapped the viceroy and maybe punish them as well. But the viceroy's not actually really very important at all, so they're not really bothered. They just want to station more soldiers in Koya, basically. They want to make sure someone's in the vicinity, someone's keeping an eye on the locals. Overall, that amount of military force seems a bit unnecessary. There are like 80 soldiers there, but the Quadling people are really docile and actually quite welcoming. They literally hand them a key to their government building, no questions asked. And when the soldiers get into the building, it's quite clear that the viceroy has actually I'm definitely saying that wrong. The viceroy has definitely been gone for really quite a long time. The building needs a lot of repairs, so God knows how long he's been gone. So the soldiers get to work fixing the place up and getting to know the locals. 3 or 4 years pass like that, and they're really integrated into the community now. They build a school and a doctor's surgery, and some of the men even move out of the soldiers' quarters and in with quaddling women. Specifically quaddling women though, no quaddling men. Gregory Maguire is very specific about it being quaddling women. Not Lear though. He spends his time being a bit of a busybody working in Commander Cherrystone's office. He does mostly the filing and the admin, but he likes to stick his nose in and give his opinion about who needs to be punished and why. When Cherrystone leaves his office, Lear likes to sneak around and read all his newspapers to keep up to date on current affairs. He reads that the Scarecrow has suffered a tragic lighter fluid accident, and the new person in power is just called the Emperor. One day, Commander Cherrystone invites Lear outside for a cigarette. Lear's never smoked before, but he gives it a go. He's setting a bad example, guys. Don't give in to peer pressure. And he just coughs and splutters like I did that one time I tried a cigarette outside a nightclub. Cherrystone is usually pretty cold with Lear, but this time he's very complimentary. He tells Lear that he really appreciates all of his hard work and that he would have been so happy to have a son like him, but his wife had only given him girls. Lear says that he must miss his daughters, but Cherrystone just replies, "They're girls." Glad to see the patriarchy's alive and well, even in the fictional land of Oz. Lear asks how Cherrystone stomached kidnapping Fiero's wife and children, given that he has a family of his own. And we get an almost human moment from Cherrystone for kind of the first time here. He says that when he's on duty, he has to really try to separate his duties from his personal life. He didn't like how things had happened at Kiamo Co, but he did his best to delegate what he could, so he didn't actually have to do a lot of it. And also, he does remember Nor. She was very brave. Changing the subject, Cherrystone asks Lear if he might be up for a promotion to the role of minor Minossier. And Lear says he doesn't deserve that, but Cherrystone insists. He confesses that the Emperor has been in touch to say he's not happy with how their mission is being run, so we need to abort that mission and change direction. He wants Lear's help setting up this new mission, and he tells him that he's got his sights set on a community of quaddling people living near a river in an area called Bengda. Here they are. The Bengdanis had actually set up their entire settlement on a bridge instead of the ground because of how swampy it is. It was too hard for them to find anywhere solid. So they now live on this bridge and they support themselves by charging toll fees to any boats who want to pass underneath it. Commander Cherrystone has decided that's not allowed. I'm not really sure what gives him the right to do that, but sure. So Lear suggests threatening them with a fine, thinking they would probably just roll over and accept it. But Cherrystone wants to charge them 3 times everything they've collected since they arrived. Bearing in mind they've been here literal years by this point, so that just seems unreasonable. Not that any fine would be reasonable because it's literally none of his business, but you know, it seems very extreme. He just seems to want them to resist, like he's trying to back them into a corner. He tells Lear to go and get some information on the Bengdani people, so that is what he does. He sort of fake befriends them and then tips them off about Cherrystone's plans to charge them to kind of gauge their reaction, but ultimately their reaction is fine. They say that obviously it's not ideal, but they would just come together as a community to find that money if that's what they need to do. But when Lear reports back to Cherrystone, he seems really annoyed that they've literally agreed to pay his fines and makes Lear take a notice back to them that they now owe twice what he originally said. So that is now 6 times everything they've earned in the years since they've been there. And they have to stop charging the toll charge. The Bengdanis say no to these terms, obviously, and they do pay what they can, but they give no promises about when Commander Cherrystone can expect to see the rest of it, and they continue to charge the toll for crossing. He then tells Lear to basically go on a smear campaign of the Bengdanis, telling anyone who will listen about their resistance loudly and in all the public spaces he can. But it doesn't quite have the effect that Cherrystone was hoping for, and most of the quaddling people side with the Bengdanis. The locals in Koya already think of Cherrystone as someone who is a bit too big for his boots. He's trying to do too much. They think he's unreasonable and his soldiers are lazy and complacent. So instead of siding with Cherrystone, they side with the Bengdanis. He doesn't want to risk the Bengdanis joining forces with Koya or turning against the soldiers, so he tells Lear to pick a small troop of men to join him on a top secret mission. I can't reach my small troop. So that night, Lear gathers his troop and tells them to dress in dark colours, cover their faces and tell no one. He's chosen these boys specifically because they have quadling girlfriends. So as soon as their task is over, they can run back into bed with them and try something new and spicy in the bedroom. So they definitely make it a night worth remembering, as if the police wouldn't question if the alibis of every single guy was that he was busy trying something new and freaky in the bedroom. Although I suppose there are no police really, are there? They are the police. I think it's more to protect them from the quadlings than anything. So when the group of soldiers reach the river where they can see the bridge, it's clear that the Bengdani community is very much still awake. They've got the lights on, they're eating supper, they're chatting together, they can hear babies crying and parents singing lullabies. Lear finally reveals the plan to the crew and they split, so half of them are on the far side of the bridge and half of them, including Lear, are on the near side. When they're all in position, Lear gives the signal and suddenly both sides of the bridge go up in flames. Sorry. It's attached. Okay, anyway, it spreads really quickly and the Bengdanis quickly catch on. They try to find safe places to jump into the water, but the soldiers have also filled the water with oil to make it flammable. So the fire is spreading even over the water and it's literally leaving them with nowhere to go. Lear struggles to look away but decides if they want to get out without getting caught, they need to go now. They've started the process of killing hundreds of innocent people and now it's time for them to go back and show their girlfriends a good time or whatever. As they're leaving, Lear turns back for a split second and he sees two parents grabbing a really young child whose clothes are on fire. There are so many screams coming from the bridge, he can't make out theirs specifically, but he cannot look away. He watches as they fling the baby girl into the water, but before she even reaches the water, the flames completely engulf her parents and there is no way they make it out alive. Lear immediately breaks free from the rest of the soldiers, telling them to go on without him while he runs towards the girl, but he can't find her. And he's not sure if she's swum ashore, if she swum into a fire, or drowned in the water. Finally, a smidge of morality from Lear, but I think we can all agree it's far too little too late. When Lear makes it back to base, the soldiers are all celebrating the success of the mission, but all he can think about is that poor girl he hadn't been able to save, as if it wasn't his fault in the first place. He makes his excuses and heads straight up to his room, where he packs his cloak and his broom and puts his work boots on the windowsill as a symbol to anyone looking for him that he's jumped. He runs away into the night. As Lear runs, he seems really beside himself and quite suicidal. He tries so hard to think of nothing, but he just feels really heavy. He walks for weeks. His hair's getting really long and getting in his eyes, so he tries to cut it with his army knife, but he does a terrible job of it. And he ends up grabbing chunks and just yanking them out by the root, which then starts violently bleeding, and then the blood pours into his eyes. The book says he thought the blood might refresh his broken tear ducts, because that's how that works. And then he dried his face and tied his hair back, but I thought he just pulled it all out. So is he just cutting about looking like weird Barbie?
Hi, how are you?
As Lear keeps walking, his mood does improve a bit. I almost found myself feeling sorry for him, but no, he did just murder hundreds of people, including babies. So my sympathy is very limited. It takes him over 2 months of walking, and in that time I have changed him back out of his soldier's outfit. But eventually Lear approached the castle that he used to call his home. We're back in Kiamo Co. He hasn't visited in over a decade since he left with Dorothy, and just seeing the outside of the building makes him feel really overcome with emotion. But in those 10 years, the castle has fallen into disrepair. He can see that just from the outside, but there is smoke coming out of the chimney, so he knows someone must be in. He opens the gates, and despite the human-sized weeds, broken windows and monkey poo all over the floor, he instantly feels like he's home. The monkeys spot him and they're terrified. The book says a couple shat themselves. Is shat a word in the dictionary? It feels like it shouldn't be. One says Lear's name and he immediately recognises Chistery, even though he's still got no eyes. Chistery grins and he seems really happy to be recognised, which kind of breaks my heart a bit. His language skills are much better than all of the other monkeys, so it must have been really lonely for him. And the two walk hand in hand into the hallway, just as they had done nearly 20 years ago when Lear had first first arrived at the castle. Lear realises that he'd kind of been subconsciously hoping that Noor would be there, and he feels a really sudden pang of sadness, but it leaves quite quickly because the smell of monkey shit in that place is so strong he can hardly think about anything else. He's surprised to find that Nanny is still alive. She is over 90 years old. She's pretty much lost all of her senses and she's not making lots of sense, but she's still alive and kicking. She can't remember who Lear is, so he has to introduce himself several times, but it doesn't really stick. But Nanny is convinced that Elphaba's studying in her bedroom, and she moans that she never makes the effort to come and see her. And she asks what happened to Lear, not realising that he's right in front of her, and says that he never writes to her. And I hope that makes him feel bad, actually. He should. Lear asks Nanny if she thinks Elphaba was Lear's mother, and she says she doesn't know, and that not even Elphaba knew. But she does say that she doesn't think the answer matters much because it doesn't actually change anything, and that Lear could just choose to believe it if he wanted to. In a moment of clarity, she remembers that Lear left with Dorothy, and she asks, did Dorothy ever stop whimpering? Her fanny wants spanking badly. Horrendous. That's not Lear. Where's Lear? Lear spends the next few weeks restoring Kiamo Co and teaching the monkeys not to shit in the house. He makes Nanny's room more comfortable and more sanitary, and he sleeps in Noor's room. He never had one of his own, if you remember that. One day, Lear spots an injured swan princess. See, she's a princess. She's got a little tiara. Right outside the gates of Kiamo Co. He brings her some milk and helps her wash the blood off herself. She's been attacked, but she can't name what by. She says she'd been on her way to a conference of birds, obviously, when it had happened. Lear asks what the conference was about, but she won't answer at first. But a few days pass and she's growing weaker, so she does eventually tell him that there is a rising threat and things are getting worse. She's quite vague, but she says that everything bad that's happening in Oz is connected. So because the birds fly up above and see everything, they were coming together to kind of share their knowledge to try and figure out what's happening. She then passes away from her injuries and Lear buries her respectfully in the back garden. Rest in peace to you. Lear takes it upon himself to go to the Conference of Birds himself to explain what happened to the Swan Princess. He says it's what Elphaba would have done. And for the first time, he finds the courage to go up to her room and he hunts around for the grimoire for a bit, but he can't find it. What he does find, though, is a pair of men's leather boots, and he picks them up and realizes that there's something inside, and it's a picture of a young girl. And when he turns it over, it says on the back that it's a sketch of Noor by Fiyero. So this, at the very least, implies that Elphaba had a fondness for Fiyero if she's hanging on to his old boots. Maybe that means they were his parents after all. He spots a glass orb, and as he gets closer, he sees an image in it of Elphaba and Fiyero kissing. I guess this is supposed to be like confirmation that they did have a romantic relationship. Chistery senses that Lear is quite scared to attend the conference, so he says, he really doesn't have to do that. But Lear says that Elphaba would have qualified for the conference because she flew on a broom. And he says, I may not have her blood, but I have her broom. I'm all there is. And I'm kind of reading that as acceptance, that he'll never know with 100% certainty if she is his mum, but he's just decided to act like she is anyway. And I assume she is. The book is literally called Son of a Witch. So he straddles the broom, jumps out of the window of Elphaba's tower, and hopes for the best. And suddenly, he's flying. He's looking down at the land below, but it all looks like smudges because he's just so high up. He spots 4 massive birds heading towards him, so he drops down to avoid them. They take a lot longer to maneuver than he does because they're so much bigger, but they seem to be trying to catch him up, so he darts about as quickly as he can. Eventually, he feels one directly above him, and talons start to pierce his skin. He turns to fight the bird, but as he does that, he turns his face and realizes they are dragons. They toss him between them, their claws ripping his clothes off, and eventually they manage to get him off his broom, and then they let him fall. So, what happened to Lear? Does he ever find out for sure who his parents are? Does he find Noor? What is going on with the Conference of Birds? Who is the mysterious emperor? What does he want? Does Princess Nastoya ever find a way to go back to her elephant form? What is Mother Yackle up to? So many questions. But the good news is, the story doesn't end there. I told you there's going to be a part 2, and it's up already. As you can tell, this is a very long story, and we are only just over halfway through. So you can click the video on screen to head over to part 2 on my brand new YouTube channel. That channel is just going to be for long form content like this. So we're going to be talking about books, films, TV shows, musicals, pop culture in general. It's going to be a great time. So if you do enjoy these kinds of videos, please make sure you subscribe over there. But over here, we are now going to be doing a house renovation and a trip to Orlando. All good stuff, but I thought it was best to separate the 2 different video styles in case some people are interested in one but not the other. So I will see you over there. Please do actually go over there. I'm watching you, I'll know. Click the video right here. It literally couldn't be any easier. Okay, love you, bye.